Redditors who went to high school with a celebrity, what were they like before they were famous? Went to high school with Drake. He put $3 separate dollars into a vending machine before he realized it was broken. At that point he was famous as the wheelchair guy from Degrassi. Went to school with Lord Takapuna Grammar. She wasn't particularly cool or weird. But when we were 17 she hit on my friend at a party and he was like, "You're 14. Duck off." Her sister's a relich though. Apparently. I was thinking. I had no idea Lord's real name was so weird. I need some sleep. My dad went to high school with the voice of Patrick Star. He was actually a really smart, popular, nice guy. He was also naturally goofy, as you might expect. I can't even imagine what the person would look like because all I can picture is a star. He was also Marshall's dad on How I Met Your Mother. Taylor Lautner went to my high school. He was a year ahead. He was also a kinda weird kid. I remember him rolling around on the floor in his video production class. There was also that time the Elephant Bar was mobbed with paparazzi in town cause he went there with his then GF Taylor Swift. I also rented a library book with Ashley Tisdale's name in it. Good ole Santa Clarita. My dad went to the same high school as Steve Harvey and told me he couldn't believe it when he discovered he was famous because Steve hardly ever said anything and was the shy kid. He'd always confidently give answers in class only to find out that they were wrong. Never met Taylor Swift in person but we had lots of friends in common. They all didn't like her cause she was really annoying and super odd. Do they count as friends if they didn't like her? Good point. I guess classmates would be a better description. I think a lot were friends to her face. I'm not a fan but I've heard a lot of her early music was pretty closely based off her high school experience. Backstabbing people, being jerks, etc. Douche boyfriend. I heard similar stories involving her so they are probably true. I was a year behind Zach Galifianakis in elementary and high school. He seems like pretty much the exact same guy he was years ago, down to earth. Super funny and a little goofy. He was also a Boy Scout. Boy Scout totally describes this guy. At some point, he made friends with a homeless woman. He got her an apartment and paid her expenses for quite a period of time. He has also brought her along to several of his movie premieres. Though I'm not a big fan of his, I will always respect that about him. I always get annoyed hearing about celebs spending money on such wasteful things that when I hear about them actually doing something good with that wealth, it makes me think of them in a much better light. I always thought Katy Perry, then Katie Hudson, was kind of an idiot when we were in high school together. Then she dropped out after about 6 months. Got her get. And made millions. Guess she was smarter than I thought. Oh. Honey. My boyfriend's mother was Sandra Bullock's college roommate at ECU. She said that Sandy was very driven and serious about her work. Which is probably why she is the accomplished actress she is today. Random Sandra Bullock fact. She speaks almost impeccable German. There is a German prize she won and her whole speech was spoken freely and almost without fault or even an inclination that she lived in America. Her mother was German. Didn't go to school with him. But Eminem did a speech at my school when I about 14. I walked out of the auditorium halfway through to go hang out with my then girlfriend. After his speech, Eminem toured the school. My girlfriend and I saw him and jokingly called out his name. To which he heard us and came over to chat for a few minutes. Pretty cool reward for skipping class and hanging out in the halls. Very down to earth guy. Everything I've heard about Eminem from people who met or used to know him is that he's a pretty down to earth guy. And even if he didn't see you, he must have missed you. Don't think he did that it intentionally just to diss you. Barely counts, but when I was getting at it to a Bruno Mars song came on and my artist started laughing and said he went to elementary school with him. Apparently all he remembers any time he hears him is that he hit his pants on a field trip and cried until he was picked up by his mom. Also doesn't count, but I went to college with his cousin. Said cousin was fun as duck, but when I went to his house to work on a group project he just dabbed and didn't contribute much at all. Talked a lot about how he was Bruno Mars' cousin. Lost interest pretty quickly. My older sister went to school with Brad Pitt. He asked her out once and she agreed to go. But the night before their date, her ex called and they made up and she cancelled the date with Brad. My mom went to high school in Michigan with Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell. She said they were always making movies and were both pretty big dorks, but everybody loved them. She even showed me old pictures of them filming the school news in her yearbooks. Till everyone knows Taylor Swift. And they all hate her lol. I went to school with Dave. From Dave's Tire and Auto. He's the one on the commercial about 4 AM on the public access. Yeah, that guy changed, man. He used to be cool. Went to the same high school as Ian Somerhalder. Everyone said he was really chill and no one believed him when he said he had a modeling contract. My dad went to high school with Jon Stewart and had Teller from Penn and Teller as his Latin teacher. My dad was a senior when Jon Stewart was a freshman. So he doesn't know anything about him. But he loved having Teller as a teacher. Supposedly Penn and the other guy they started out with would come into practice tricks. Also, he talked. My dad hated high school and skipped a lot of classes. But he really enjoyed his Latin classes. He passed that on to me. So really, Teller is responsible for my minor in classical language. I went to school with Margot Robbie. She was in her final year when I started high school. She was one of the mentors that I had in the first year of high school. And she seemed like a pretty normal person. Very kind. I think she already had a little bit of fame at this point, but I was none the wiser to it. I am furiously envious. He didn't go to my high school, but I grew up really close to Justin Bieber and I had friends that were close to him. One of them was actually in his movie. The Biebs brought him down to LA for a vacation. Don't really know much about how he used to be. But everyone used to make fun of him for the videos he used to put on YouTube singing. Then they all miraculously wanted to be besties after he got discovered. My husband recently met Justin Bieber in Australia. My husband, was sitting in a park while our daughter was running around. And some young guy sat down next to him. They exchanged hellos and my husband noted his Canadian accent and assumed he was a tourist lol. They chatted for about 5 minutes. My husband having absolutely no idea who he was talking to until a bodyguard came over and said, "Justin, you only have 20 minutes. My husband eventually put 2 and 2 together and realized that it was Justin Bieber, and they had a bit of a laugh about the fact that my husband hadn't recognized him. And they chatted for another 5 minutes. Apparently he was actually really nice and chill. They chatted about the WWE and playing guitar. And he was interested in what my husband does for a living. He's a bailiff. He also played with my daughter and took a selfie with them. And then went on his merry way. Not saying he hasn't acted like a douche in the past. But maybe he's grown up a bit. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt." Went to college with Rami Malek. He is now the lead of MRO Bot. And killing it in Hollywood. We text occasionally, but that is it. Haven't stayed close since college. Rami Malek seems like such a good guy. He is. He has a twin brother that is cool as hell too. My TA went to high school with Taylor Swift. She said she was a mean girl. I went to the high school that is a rival of Taylor Swift's high school. Her high school literally has a shrine there dedicated to her. I hear stories of how nasty she is all the time. This kid I go to school with was babysat by her as a kid and said she was awful. Went to school with, and performed with, Meghan Trainor. She was always super nice and genuine and friendly to everyone. Personally, I think her entitled persona is just a shtick for controversy. My grandpa used to work on the set of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and knew Will Smith personally. He introduced my parents to him and the three of them remain friends until this day. Martin Garrix went to the same high school I went to. TBH, he's a really chill and nice dude. Didn't his mum make him stay at school until he'd sat his exams? Cool lady. My mom went to high school with Prince, 1 year below him, and said he was a pretty chill guy. My mom's co-worker grew up down the street from him. She said he was an odd duck but a nice person. My aunt and her friends went to school with John Mayer. One of her friends used to bully Mayer all the time. Now he's an alcoholic and hates his life. Was friends with pornster Megan Rain in middle school and high school. We had play together in 7th or 8th grade and we would walk whenever we had to run a mile. She walked cause she was a stereotypical pretty girl who never ran. And I was fat. So we made friends. She moved schools in high school and I still saw her from time to time around town. Last I saw her was when I ran into her downtown a couple weeks before I found out she did porn. I went to high school with Linkin Park and Smash Mouth and both of them wrote different music when I used to know them, but I smoked once or twice with them. You should keep this to yourself. I know it says high school, but I went to college with Jason Derulo. Was a really nice guy. Watched him play seaweed in Hairspray his last semester. Did he announce his name every time he entered a room? Co-worker went to high school with Paul Edie from Jersey Shore. Said nothing about him stood out. Just a typical and almost stereotypical Guido. Grew up in the city in between the cities where Chris Pratt and Anna Faris grew up. My older brother knew Anna through other friends. And Chris used to sell me cheeseburgers when I'd go to the car show in the parking lot of King Charlie's where he worked. To my knowledge they didn't know each other yet. My sister's best friend's mom went to high school with Tom Cruise in NJ. She said he was dirt poor, weird and lied a lot. In her words, short little chubby thing would follow me around. She said his teeth were all ducked up, and when he said he was taking acting classes everyone thought he was bulleting because he lied all the time. She said if I knew he was going to be famous, I would have been nicer. Nah, he was weirdo then and a weirdo now. My aunt went to high school with Barack Obama in Hawaii. She said he was a really friendly guy and was very smart and courteous. Went to high school with Jeremy Lin. He was nice. Didn't cause trouble. And seemed happy being focused on basketball. My high school Spanish teacher took an English class at UCLA with James Franco as the professor. She FaceTimed him during class one day and it was the coolest thing ever. Apparently he's super smart and really down to earth. Went to HS with an NFL All-Star. He had to be one of the dumbest people I've ever met in my life. I remember one time I ran into him at a local arcade and I noticed that he kept his spare quarters in his mouth. It was revolting. When he needed another quarter he'd just spit it out into his hand and put it into the machine. Had a couple of other non-famous pro athletes at my HS too. But they were pretty cool and relatively normal, if arrogant. Went to high school with Mike Will Made It. Sat next to him in geometry my freshman year, his sophomore. He was pretty quiet for the most part. Okay with the schoolwork as far as I remember. Even the people he talked to didn't seem to know all that much about him and kinda teased him for how quiet he always was. Started hearing whispers of him hanging with Gucci by my junior year, 2006, and then he blew up like 4-5 years later. Nicki Minaj was 2 years ahead of me in high school. We weren't close at all. She went by Cookie back then. She was much darker skinned and had a bigger nose and no bobs or bud to speak of. She was very loud and attention seeking but nice to everybody. Not high school, but middle school, 6th grade. I sat across Tyler the Creator for one semester. But he was in my class all year long. He was always making stupid jokes, and of course inappropriate jokes here and there. He broke my pen and said I could just go buy another one lol. He was always chatty, talking about his favorite hip hop artists, the Neptunes and NERD I believe, towards the last few days of school. Our teacher brought a camcorder to record the class. And he wanted to do a rap battle with another classmate sitting in our group. The entire class roared with laughter and I wish I could remember why. But the opponent sat down afterwards. I didn't know he was Tyler the Creator until a few years ago. Crazy that he's famous now. And his humor is still intact. Went to school with Gigi Hadid. She was the hottest girl there, so I mean everyone knew she was going to be big. Found the rich kid. Not high school. But my brother went to preschool with Jacob Sartorius. They were kinda friends. And he had a huge 6th birthday party with a Spider-Man impersonator and a cotton candy machine. Don't really remember anything about him beyond that. He was supposed to attend the school we are both at, but is pretty much universally hated at this point. It is kinda funny to hear a bunch of seniors curse out a would-be freshman for being a stuck-up prick though. Went to school and am still friends with Stevie from Malcolm in the Middle. He's a really down-to-earth guy, loves all his friends. His birthday was actually yesterday, Sunday. My hubs knew The Big Show, a WWE wrestler, when they both worked at a car sales place before he was The Big Show. Said he was a nice man, if a bit intimidating because he is huge. Hands the size of hams. My grandma allegedly babysat Chad Kroger from Nickelback. She said he was a whiny kid and I believe her. I went to school with the Zion mainframe from The Matrix. Shy but really down to earth and funny once you got talking. My life is oddly intertwined with Miley Cyrus in a few ways. 1. She and her dad went to the church in my area and she was always well behaved and just like anyone else. She also didn't stay long, but was comfy enough with one person in my family to let him sit next to her in the pew. 2. My elementary school music teacher. This 60-plus-year-old guy who was balding with a Duck Dynasty beard took his teenage daughter to try out and be an extra in the Hannah Montana movie. The casting people picked him instead of his daughter. He didn't even audition. Miranda Kerr. Typical popular pretty girl, who tried hard and had everyone fawn over her. Basically the perfect poster child and good girl who did whatever she was asked. I mean that with no disrespect intended. Her parents on the other hand are attention seekers and I have no respect for them. They moved the family across the country for her career when she was still quite young, without much care factor for her childhood. Even less care factor for her younger brother who has struggled a lot in life living in her shadow. She was doing magazine shoots at 14 and being heavily made up and posed in skimpy outfits. There was quite a bit of uproar locally with people asking the question of whether it borderline on pedo stuff. Because she was just so young but they were making her up to be so much older. Because she was so tall and skinny with such big eyes and lips. It seemed they were sexualizing a girl who wasn't even in the area of the legal age of consent. And it always seemed off that a parent would allow that. In a hoe. The parents basically made it all about her and they pinned everything on her gaining success at whatever cost. The parents were quite controlling. And only gave the brother half glances in life. I believe Miranda tried to distance herself from them for a while. And not long ago they were doing interviews to the media saying they hadn't seen her in years and she wouldn't speak to them and didn't know why. Again, manipulative attention seeking trash. I have nothing good to say about her parents. At all.